in distinctions. Again, I beg your pardon. You know very well that although all Strelsau were at the door, I wouldn't touch the letter." With an angry muttered oath, Rupert flung his revolver on the table. Rudolf came forward and laid his by it. Then he took up both, and crossing to the mantelpiece, laid them there. Between them he placed the Queen's letter. A bright blaze burnt in the grate. It needed but the slightest motion of his hand to set the letter beyond all danger. But he placed it carefully on the mantelpiece, and with a slight smile on his face turned to Rupert, saying: "Now, shall we resume the bout that Fritz von Tarlenheim interrupted in the forest of Zenda?" All this while they had been speaking in subdued accents, resolution in one, anger in the other, keeping the voice in even, deliberate lowness. The girl outside caught only a word here and there, but now suddenly the flash of steel gleamed on her eyes through the crevice of the hinge. She gave a sudden gasp, and pressing her face closer to the opening, listened and looked, for Rupert of Hentzau had taken the swords from their case and put them on the table. With a slight bow, Rudolf took one, and the two assumed their positions. Suddenly Rupert lowered his point. The frown vanished from his face, and he spoke in his usual bantering tone. "By the way," said he, "perhaps we are letting our feelings run away with us. Have you more of a mind now to be King of Ruritania? If so, I am ready to be the most faithful of your subjects." "You honour me, Count." "Provided, of course, that I am one of the most favoured and the richest. Come, come, the fool is dead now. He lived like a fool, and he died like a fool. The place is empty. A dead man has no rights and suffers no wrongs. Damn it, that's good law, isn't it? Take his place and his wife. You can pay my price then. Or are you still so virtuous? Faith, how little some men learn from the world they live in! If I had your chance." "Come, Count, you'd be the last man to trust Rupert of Hentzau." "If I made it worth his while." "But he's a man who would take the pay and betray his associate." Again Rupert flushed. When he next spoke his voice was hard, cold, and low. "By God, Rudolf Rassendyll," said he, "I'll kill you here and now." "I ask no better than that you should try." "And then I'll proclaim that woman for what she is in all Strelsau." A smile came on his lips as he watched Rudolf's face. "Guard yourself, my lord," said Mr. Rassendyll. "Ay, for no better than There, man, I am ready for you." For Rudolf's blade had touched his in warning. The steel jangled. The girl's pale face was at the crevice of the hinge. She heard the blades cross again and again. Then one would run up the other with a sharp, grating slither. At times she caught a glimpse of a figure in quick forward lunge or rapid, wary withdrawal. Her brain was almost paralyzed. Ignorant of the mind and heart of young Rupert, she could not conceive that he tried to kill the king. Yet the words she had caught sounded like the words of men quarrelling, and she could not persuade herself that the gentlemen fenced only for pastime. They were not speaking now, but she heard their hard breathing and the movement of their unresting feet on the bare boards of the floor. Then a cry rang out, clear and merry, with the fierce hope of triumph. "Nearly, nearly!" She knew the voice for Rupert of Hentzau's, and it was the king who answered calmly, "Nearly isn't quite." Again she listened. They seemed to have paused for a moment, for there was no sound save of hard breathing and deep drawn pants of men who rest an instant in the midst of intense exertion. Then came again the clash and the slitherings, and one of them crossed into her view. She knew the tall figure, and she saw the red hair. It was the king. Backward, step by step, he seemed to be driven, coming nearer and nearer to the door. At last there was no more than a foot between him and her. Only the crazy panel prevented her from putting out her hand to touch him. Again the voice of Rupert rang out in rich exultation. "I have you now. Say your prayers, King Rudolf." Say your prayers! Then they fought. It was earnest, not play. And it was the king, her dear king, who was in great peril of his life. For an instant she knelt, still watching. Then, with a low cry of terror, she turned and ran headlong down the steep stairs. Her mind could not tell what to do, but her heart cried out that she must do something for her king. Reaching the ground floor, she ran with wide open eyes into the kitchen. The stew was on the hob. The old woman still held the spoon, but she had ceased to stir and fallen into a chair. "He's killing the king! He's killing the king!" cried Rosa, seizing her mother by the arm. "Mother, what shall we do? He's killing the king!" The old woman looked up with dull eyes and a stupid, cunning smile. "Leave them alone," she said. "There's no king here." "Yes, yes, he's upstairs in the count's room. They're fighting, he and the Count of Hentzau. Mother, Count Rupert will kill." "Leave them alone. He's the king. He's no king," muttered the old woman again. For an instant Rosa stood looking down on her in helpless despair. Then a light flashed into her eyes. "I must call for help," she cried. The old woman seemed to spring to sudden life. She jumped up and caught her daughter by the shoulder. "No, no," she whispered in quick accents. You don't know. Leave them alone, you fool. It's not our business. Leave them alone." "Let me go, mother. Let me go. Mother, I must help the king." "I'll not let you go," said Mother Holf. But Rosa was young and strong. Her heart was fired with terror for the king's danger. "I must go," she cried, and she flung her mother's grasp off from her, so that the old woman was thrown back into her chair, and the spoon fell from her hand and clattered on the tiles. But Rosa turned and fled down the passage and through the shop. The bolts delayed her trembling fingers for an instant. Then she flung the door wide. A new amazement filled her eyes at the sight of the eager crowd before the house. Then her eyes fell on me where I stood between the lieutenant and Rischenheim, and she uttered her wild cry, "Help! The king!" With one bound I was by her side and in the house, while Bernenstein cried "Quicker!" from behind. Chapter 17